I'm Frank Garza, and welcome to Here and Abroad, a podcast that follows the U.S. men's national team and their player pool across Europe, MLS, or wherever else they play their club football. On today's show, we're going to preview the USMNT's upcoming friendlies. They play Venezuela this Saturday, January 18th in Fort Lauderdale, and then Costa Rica on January 22nd in Orlando. These matches are part of the team's annual January camp, which traditionally calls in players mostly from MLS. Tell Me Today, I've invited Larry Henry Jr. back to the show. Larry is the managing editor for SBI Soccer and live reporter at The Athletic. Larry, welcome to the show.
Hey, Frank. Good to be back with you again. Our first show of 2025 together. So excited for that, and definitely excited to see the USMNT back in action in the next week or so. So happy to break it down with you, and excited for what the everything to come this new year.
Yeah, we've had a break for a couple months with the USMNT. It's nice to see them back together. Let's start with the roster. Pochettino, he called in 24 players for the camp. 23 of them are from MLS. There's some experienced players like Tim Ream, Miles Robinson, Zach Steffen, who have been getting regular call-ups in the first team since Pochettino arrived. But most of the rest of these guys are more kind of outside looking in, or they're kind of young up-and-comers looking to get their first cap. Let's look at the goalkeepers first. Drake Callender, Matt Freese, Patrick Schulte, and Zach Steffen were the four that were called in. Of those four, which one would you be most excited to see get some minutes in one of these friendlies?
Yeah, I mean, obviously a kind of a wide range of players here, right? In terms of their age and experience with the national team, and also some that haven't had experience with the national team before. I think being a Philly guy, I'm excited, I think, to see Matt Freese get an opportunity. It was kind of maybe a strange inclusion to the roster because he is 26. He, prior to this past season with NYCFC, he hasn't really played a whole much with them, and also with the Philadelphia Union. He mainly served as Andre Blake's backup during his time in Philadelphia, but he did have some opportunities when Blake was hurt, and I believe even the COVID year when Philly had to basically play all their backups, that Eastern Conference final against NYCFC, and he was in that day as well. But I think he had a really good first full season with NYCFC. Had 6 clean sheets. He's a tall goalkeeper. I think he makes a lot of good saves. And I think it's cool to see a guy like that get an opportunity after kind of fighting his way in his club career to make a name for himself and to get a number one job. He has that now with NYCFC, and I'm sure. I think all 4 of these goalkeepers probably know the situation right now around the number one spot. Matt Turner or Ethan Horvath or others in the mix. I think all 4 of these guys will definitely be fighting to be part of maybe that number 2 role. Definitely, I think the number 3 role for this next year. But I'd be excited to see Matt Freese get an opportunity and make his senior debut for the national team.
Yeah. The goalkeeper position does seem to be one of these positions with the USMNT that's wide open. And, even Matt Turner, even though Pochettino seems to have a lot of confidence in him because he's given him all the starts, since he arrived, with his lack of playing time, I don't know how firm a grasp he has, but you make a good point. The number 2 and 3 guys are super wide open, as well. So, I'm looking forward to seeing all of these guys. Matt Freese is a good shout. A lot of people were saying he deserved to get called in because the excellent season he had, last season. The person I want to see most is actually Zach Steffen, though. Just because I'm a fan of him. It's been just a rough, long journey for him, since getting left off that World Cup roster. back for the 2022 World Cup. It was nice to see him get called back in. I just love to see him out on the field again, in goal, playing a match. But I think my perfect scenario would be maybe Matt Freese gets one start, Zach Steffen gets the other start in these two matches. I've already seen enough of Patrick Schulte. I know he's an excellent player. Nothing against him. Don't have too much of a desire to see Drake Callender, to be honest with you. I think he's been in camp enough too, but I'd love to see Matt Freese and Zach Steffen out there. Do you think any of these four could realistically push Matt Turner for the number one spot?
Yeah, I think looking at it, I think Stefan would probably be the guy, right? He has the experience. He has, 29 caps under his belt. I know it's a new coach with Pochettino in over Greg Berhalter, but I think Stefan still, I think the most important thing for him was to get back to playing regularly after his time at Manchester City. He's done that now with Colorado. They've kind of turned it around as a franchise in the last season or two. Not only with him there, but with some other American players coming back from Europe to come play there. I think Stefan could definitely push Turner. I would say probably not the other three. I think Schulte is still young enough where he could be a long-term option, not only for, 2026, but 2030. 2034. I think he could be a guy, down the road. I'm kind of the same with you. I don't really have much interest in seeing Drake Callender. I know we know what he's about. He was an important part of Inter Miami's team, but I don't really need to see more of him. And then Matt Freese, I think, again, a little bit on the older side to make his debut, but again, I think the most important thing for him and even Schulte, I think at this stage is to, fight for even that number three or maybe even number two job. But I think Stefan would be the one out of this group that could realistically push Matt Turner.
Yeah, Zach Steffen, one of these kind of veterans looking to break his way, back into that regular, first team, and another guy called into this camp who maybe fits that category is Walker Zimmerman. He was one of the center backs called in along with George Campbell from Montreal, Jalen Neal from Montreal, Tim Ream, Miles Robinson. So what is that? 5 center backs called in. And Zimmerman's an interesting one to me. I mean, this is a guy that played at the 2022 World Cup regularly. I don't even know if he's been called into the team, since then. Maybe for a Gold Cup or January camp or something like that. I know we played at the Olympics, but he's kind of seems to have been forgotten. But I mean, with center back being another one of these positions that seems to be a little bit up in the air for the USMNT, do you think Walker Zimmerman has any shot of putting in a performance so good that he earns himself a spot in that March Nations League roster?
It's tough to say, right? I think he does bring that veteran experience. He has 41 caps. He did have 5 caps after the 2022 World Cup, but he hasn't had any in 2024. So this will be his first time, hopefully getting a cap for the first time in almost 2 years. I still think he brings a lot to the table. He's he's good in the air. He's doesn't really put a lot of feet wrong in terms of making errors. I think the center back position, similar to the goalkeeping position, I still think it's up for grabs. Right? There's so many guys I think in the mix that could realistically be in there for 2026. I'm obviously Tim Ream is the veteran of the center back group, but he is getting older now, and we don't know how much longer Tim Ream's really going to, will he be there for 2026? I'm assuming he will try to be there, but, injuries can happen, things can happen. There's a lot of younger guys as well in the mix, Mark McKenzie, Austin Trusty, Chris Richards, Cameron Carter-Vickers. But I still think there's, even other guys that could be, fighting their way in the mix, and I think Zimmerman is one of them. So a strong camp here could be the start of what could be a good season for him in MLS. It's going to be another long schedule for them, but I think these guys that are getting these call ups from MLS clubs, they're definitely getting an early start, right, to competitive action ahead of the start of the MLS season. So, yeah, I think it'd be a great kind of redemption story for Walker Zimmerman if he was able to get back into the team regularly and ahead of 2026.
Yeah, you can't say he's too old. I mean, he's 31. And I mean, what is Tim Ream now?
30,
35, 36?
36. Yeah,
36.
36.
Okay. So, I mean, they're both in MLS now. Tim Ream's 5 years older than him. I guess I thought about Walker Zimmerman as being kind of like past his prime a little bit, but I don't know. He seems like one of those guys that could go into a camp and impress somebody like Pochettino because he's a good team guy. He'll have good leadership. He'll go out there and compete. Like Pochettino's always talking about. So we'll see. It'll be interesting. I mean, like you said, center back has a lot of competition. There's a lot of names that are competing, but not a whole lot of like standouts, that are competing. There's a lot of players that seem to be very even with each other, competing for that spot. Do you know much about George Campbell? Because he's a young guy, 23 years old. Came out of, I know, Atlanta United's youth academy, but I'd be kind of curious to see him play just because I don't know too much about him. Do you know much about him?
Yeah, I mean, George Campbell has definitely kind of, started a nice career for himself. He actually was born in Pennsylvania in Chester. He actually, not far from where the Philadelphia Union are at now. Ended up, moving to Atlanta as a kid, and like you said, came through Atlanta United's academy before debuting for the first team in 2020. I think he made about 35, 36 appearances for Atlanta United before heading to CF Montreal, where he's earned more playing time and a larger role there. So, and he's young. He's 23, 6 feet 2. So a little bit on the taller side. Has featured for the USU 23 team for 3 times. So I think he's definitely a guy who was talked about a little bit during his time at Atlanta United, but kind of had to wait for his opportunity, and since moving to Montreal has definitely become a regular in MLS. So I am excited to see him get an opportunity, and I think he could be a guy that we could see similar to Patrick Schulte in a way where maybe not 2026, but definitely I think could be in the mix for 2030.
Okay. There's these young MLS players that we've been hearing about being future USMNT stars for, I mean, it seems like 2, 3, 4 years now. The guys that stand out to me in a group are, John Tolkien, Benjamin Kramaski, Diego Luna, and Jack McGlynn. I mean, it just seems like those are young players in MLS we're always talking about. I believe they were all at the Olympics except for Diego Luna, and a lot of people felt like he was the biggest, snub from that team. So, these are 4 guys that they're young, but they're not like the youngest players to come in the camp. They're not like looking for their debut or anything like that. They've been kind of on the periphery for a while. Which of those 4 do you think has the best chance to, put in a good performance this camp and maybe get closer to making it into the first team?
Yeah, this one was a tough one to break down. I think all 4 are talented players and have very bright futures ahead of them. I think when you look at it, right, I think you have to look at it as not only the skill of the player, but also maybe the pathway for them to break into the first team. Obviously, maybe the number 9 position might be a little tough with the amount of options the U.S. have, or other positions, left back being one with Anthony Robinson. I think Diego Luna, I think, would be the player I think that has the best shot of making it into the first team with a good January camp. Obviously, like you said, he's been talked about before. Was kind of snubbed from that Olympic team. I think he had a really good season with Real Salt Lake. The team overall did extremely well. He was a big part of that. He's just a kind of a pestering winger, forward, whatever whatever you want to call him, because he can play so many different roles. He really just kind of pesters defenders. He brings a really good engine to the field. Can score goals, can set up goals, can play out wide. I think he would be the one I think that could really has a shot of making the team. I'm not sure maybe about March, but definitely I think over the summer, right, with the Gold Cup coming up. I think that's going to be another competition where you could see some of these young players featuring in. Kermashki and McGlynn, I think they're very talented players. McGlynn is one of the, top soccer IQs, that former Union head coach Jim Curtin has preached a lot. Kermashki is definitely a talented player as well in midfield. John Tolkien, I think, could realistically fight for the number 2 left back job with behind Anthony Robinson. I don't see Robinson being overtaken anytime soon, but that number 2 job I think could be up for grabs with Christopher Lund, being in and out of the squad over in Italy. But looking at it, I think Luna is definitely a live wire. He's kind of an X factor player, and could bring a lot to this team for sure.
Yeah, I'm excited to see Diego Luna in this camp. I mean, he's an exciting player to watch. Young MLS Player of the Year, last season, becoming more and more important to that RSL team. You could see him just having a great couple of matches, in these two friendlies and impressing Pochettino. And like you said, maybe he doesn't get in for March, but he just helps his chances, furthers them along. Maybe by the time we get to this summer, he can do it. One other point to consider though about these guys is I thought of Aiden Morris and like the path that he's taken over the last year, because a year ago I would have put Aiden Morris right in this group of players that we're talking about. A young MLS player who we think is going to break in, but I had seen him at camps. He just did okay with the USMNT, but then he got that transfer to Middlesbrough and he started getting called in 2024 and he looked like a different player. And now he just seems like he's firmly in the mix. I know the midfield, there's a lot of competition there, but he's really firmly in the mix. I wonder if one of these guys, like, I've heard Tolkien perhaps could move, this winter. McGlynn, I don't know if I've heard any specific rumors about him, but he's always talked about as maybe making the move over to Europe. I wonder if one of these guys can get themselves a move to Europe, get regular playing time in the championship or something like that, and then use their performance in this January camp plus more minutes in Europe to kind of fight their way into the team, a little bit like Aiden Morris has done. Okay, let's move on next to there's 7 players that earned their first call up to a USMNT camp. It's defenders Max Arfston from the Columbus Crew and George Campbell from Montreal, who we just talked about. Midfielder Emeka Anelli from Real Salt Lake, and forwards Patrick Ajiman from Charlotte, Brian Gutierrez from Chicago. Fire, Matko Mihovic, who's unattached but recently left Newell's Old Boys in Argentina. He's the one non-MLS player in the camp. And Indiana Vasilev from St. Louis City SC. Of these 7 players who are getting their first call up into camp, which one of them would you be most excited to see get some minutes in one of these 2 friendlies?
It was definitely tough to break it down. I think it'd be cool to obviously hopefully all these guys get an opportunity. I think Brian Gutierrez is the one that maybe stands out the most for me. He's 21 years old. He's already played a lot for a 21-year-old in MLS. He has over 100 appearances for the Chicago Fire, 10 goals, 20 assists in league play over that time. So he's been a productive player. I think last year was his overall best season in terms of his ability just to make things happen in the final third. He scored some really good goals. I think he's going to be an important piece of the Fire this season. Who I think are going to have a really good bounce back season under Greg Berhalter. I think they've done a lot of good moves in the window. They have a good overall good team. I think Berhalter will bring the best out of Gutierrez and also the team. But I think again, it's a guy who's featured for youth national teams in the past, and I think will definitely have a chip on his shoulder to prove a point this camp ahead of what could be a huge MLS season for him, because he's been a guy who has been linked with potential moves abroad, and maybe one really good season this year could be what kind of helps him make that move abroad. But Gutierrez is definitely my pick. I think Milhovic was a kind of an honorable mention. He's been in the media over the last couple years for maybe the wrong reasons in terms of his club career and having some issues, with Montreal and with Knowles. But I think he's a talented player from watching the film. I think Pochettino will definitely try to maybe get his head on a little bit straighter, and could be a guy that maybe comes out of nowhere a little bit and turns his career around and could kind of kickstart that national team career.
Yeah, it'd be fun to see those two guys. It's really going to be exciting to see what Greg Berhalter can do with the Chicago Fire, and I do think all the players that are currently there are going to benefit, from him being there, because I think the team will be better. They'll probably score more goals, and Brian Gutierrez has a good chance of really benefiting from that. Okay, so after all that, Larry, we've talked about a number of players. After all that, when you consider all these guys, except for three, I'm going to take three off the table. Tim Marine, Miles Robinson, and Zach Steffen. I feel like these three are too easy. You can't pick one of them. But of everybody but those three, give me your top two guys who you think actually have a realistic shot of making it into the first team, if not in March, but maybe by the Gold Cup this summer.
Yeah, it's a lot, again, a lot of tough choices. I'm gonna stick with Diego Luna. I think just his versatility and vertical running as a winger and or forward, I think could help the U.S. a lot. I think his pathway might be a little easier due to his position and maybe the U.S.'s kind of lack of depth at some certain attacking areas. When we look at the roster, right? I mean, we know there's a bunch of number nines in the mix. There's some number nines that are injured right now. Christian Pulisic, is he going to stay on the wing? Is he going to come into the number 10 role? Tim Weah, getting him back playing regularly. I think, when you think of the wingers, right, for the national team, there's always those guys that you immediately pencil in, like a Pulisic, like a Weah. After that, it kind of gets a little tricky because it seems like the other guys kind of are in and out or based on form and everything. So I think Luna definitely would be a guy that we could see maybe in March, but again, I think definitely by the Gold Cup. And then Jack McGlynn, I think he's been fun to watch over the last few years. When I was covering the Union a little bit more in depth, I mean, he's, again, just really smart player for his age. One of the best left foots I've seen in terms of distribution, passing, taking shots on goal. He's just, and I think Jim Curtin was a big part of that, being able to, instill that trust in him early, like Curtin did with a lot of young players in Philadelphia. So I think as a young player, that just helps you and gives you that confidence. So I don't think it'll be long until we see Jack McGlynn playing in Europe. I think he's definitely, up for that, and could be there in the next year or so. So I think Luna and McGlynn would be my two picks, but again, it could be, it's interesting to see. It'll be interesting to see what Pochettino does and how he kind of breaks these guys up into the roster over the next year or so.
Yeah, I'm with you on Diego Luna, but the other guy I have in mind is Matt Freeze, and it's just because the goalkeeper situation is just so wide open. Honestly, any of those guys, any goalkeeper. It wouldn't surprise me if any goalkeeper came out of nowhere, and made it into the team. And so, Matt Freeze coming off a good year, like we talked about. Let's say he gets a start in this camp. Let's say he just does really well in training, impresses, Pochettino and his staff with his, intensity, mental aspect to the game, professionalism. Maybe he's a guy that makes it in as that second or third, goalkeeper in the future. We'll see. Well, last thing I want to talk about is the opponents. So we're playing Venezuela and Costa Rica. Is there anything? I know that these are pretty. There's friendlies. When we play like Germany or somebody like that, where it's like our first team going against their first team, and we're pretty pumped about it. But this is one of those friendlies where we're not bringing our best team. I don't believe Venezuela and Costa Rica are bringing their best team. So I don't know how much we have to learn about, how the U.S. does, but what do you think is important for like listeners to know about Venezuela and Costa Rica as opponents?
Both teams, I think, like you said, won't be bringing their A team, but I think they both will still bring energy, will bring fight to the field. I think both of them are, bring something different from one another, which is, I think, important with these types of matches, right? You want to see different formations, different tactics, different players. I think Greg Berhalter kind of used to hint at that, right, when scheduling games. When we were wondering, hey, why are you scheduling Oman and Uzbekistan compared to other teams maybe in Europe or South America? And I think it's about getting to see again all those different strategies ahead of the World Cup. Looking at Venezuela, they already have their roster out for the friendly. It's a lot of inexperience, a lot of guys seeking their debut, like with this U.S. team. I think there's maybe there's 5-6 players that have double-digit caps on the roster. So again, I think Venezuela is going to be looking at this just like the U.S. in terms of getting younger players an opportunity. Obviously, they're going through World Cup qualifying right now in South America. So I think it's important, I guess, for them to build their roster ahead of the competition. And same thing with Costa Rica. I think, again, it might be a little bit more familiarity there in terms of them being a CONCACAF nation. But again, they're not going to be bringing their A team. A lot of the familiar faces, Joel Campbell and, other guys, Francisco Calvo, the guys we usually see in CONCACAF. It's going to be, again, young players that are trying to make their name ahead of 2026. And so I think both matches will be really well attended. Florida this time of year is I live on the East Coast up in Pennsylvania, so would have loved to have been there and get into the sun. But I think it's going to be a good experience for the national team. And again, I think it's, again, just building towards what's to come in 2026.
Yeah, I think I'm more excited about Venezuela, and if nothing else, it's maybe establishing some type of relationship with their like federation where we can get more friendlies with them. I would like to see the U.S. play more friendlies against South American teams. And if you just look at a map, Venezuela and Colombia being the northernmost countries in like South America, we should be able to have friendlies with them. I know there's World Cup qualifying, but I'm saying in open windows, it's not like flying down to Brazil or flying down to Argentina. Those are like really long flights. I believe you can fly to Colombia, Venezuela in like 4 hours or something from Texas, or Florida. And so I would love to see more friendlies against Venezuela, Colombia, teams like that, like in the future. And so I'm excited to see how this first one goes. Well, Larry, I will make sure and put links in the show notes to your X account, which is at lhenry019, and also to your work at SBI. Thank you so much for coming back on the show.
Thanks a lot, Frank, for having me. And excited to do this more as we go through the year.
Excellent. And thanks everyone for listening to Here and Abroad. If you enjoyed the episode, please do me a huge favor and hit that subscribe button if you're watching on YouTube, or that follow button if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or somewhere else. Thank you so much. I'm Frank Garza. You can follow me on X at Frank Garza 007, and I'll be back next week with a new episode.